Before we get started, and as I have said many times before, the only reason I was able to make it to Valve at all was because of the sponsorships. Specifically for today, skins.cash. Check out the link in the description below if you have some unwanted or just extra Counter-Strike, Team Fortress 2, or Dota 2 skins, items, or pretty much anything. On the website, you are able to deposit your extra items into that website's inventory and you will get money immediately. If you want to be able to trade in those for maybe a Steam game or something completely different, or you just want to cash out your inventory, this is probably one of the best ways to do it. I personally use the service, and if you use the link down in the description below, you get an extra 3% added onto your quote. And this following interview was my favorite that I did out of all of them. The Steam team ended up being some of the most friendly people next to Dave Riller that I met the entire time I was there. We talked about a whole lot of stuff, as you're about to hear, and the entire talk was actually very insightful, especially for people that have seen Steam as kind of a service that is lacking in a lot of different areas. I'm not saying they answered for every single one of Steam's sins, I'm just saying they gave some explanation for some of the problems that it has. So without further ado, here is the interview we did with the Steam team. And as always, my questions are spoken and every other press person's question will be written out and paraphrased.
Who's essentially in charge of, like, these kind of went away, but like, we had like those little community events that were always centered around the giant updates, whether that be the winter or the summer stuff. Do any of, like, if you're saying you pretty much touch anything that's on Steam, so like, did somebody on the Steam team develop that cookie clicker game with trying to?
Yes, we're all involved with those to varying degrees. So I've personally been involved in kind of every other or every two major seasonal events, and along the way we just try out different things, trying to understand what customers are interested in, and we try different events. We make whole games around them. We hold award shows, try to see what customers are most interested in. Plus, try not to do the same thing too many times and make people bored. So, yeah.
I think a good follow-up to that then would be, was anything missed during the Red Haring ARG, the winter from 2015? Because the community went berserk.
I don't think anything was necessary. Well, yes, there was some stuff missed. It was sort of to show a little bit of how things work behind the scenes. There actually wasn't originally an ARG. So we started the sale, and the community found some stuff that looked like an ARG, and we spent a couple of late nights here then inventing an ARG and trying to like plant some interesting breadcrumbs to see if we could kind of pull the community along and turn it into more of an event. We try to have the flexibility to be responsive like that, so when the community says they're really interested in something or indicates that they're really interested in something, we try to run with it and see, let's see how many happy customers we can make and how entertaining we can make this.
How closely were you following the community?
Pretty closely, yeah. And we were trying to, like, some of the times we made the clues really hard and we found that nobody was finding it, so we tried to make them easier, and at some point we just kind of hit a roadblock and the community wasn't making any progress, and we kind of ran out of time to keep building on it, so we had to kind of wrap it up.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's funny, Alden and myself and DJ and other folks here at Valve, there was a time where we'd get into a room and there'd be 400 good games that we wanted to bring to Steam, and we were looking at the tools we had and the bandwidth we had and saying, okay, let's try to pick 10. How do we pick 10 of these hundreds of good games that could easily come to Steam? And so Steam Greenlight and a bunch of the tools and features that we've worked on in the interim years were this super useful bridge to get to that point of, instead of saying there's a bunch of good games and we're the bottleneck, we're in the way, how do we get ourselves out of the way so more of those games can come to Steam faster? And so in that respect, I think Greenlight was the super useful stepping stone. It helped us go through a bunch of time over a couple of years solving problems for developers in terms of making sure they had a bunch more control over their store pages and shipping games and launching their own coming soon pages. I mean, it's a huge laundry list of improvements that we made to just the way developers are able to control their own presence on the Steam store. And then the other side of that is making sure customers could had the equipment on the Steam store to deal with a bunch more games and find the ones they were excited about. From that perspective, looking back a few years to the time where we wanted to ship 100 games and we could only ship 5, we're really excited about the fact that so many more developers are able to bring their games to Steam now.
And so Greenlight helped us sort of slowly ramp up the number of titles that we could bring in. It helped us kind of control that flow of content. But one of the things that we figured is that it ended up creating this workflow for developers that introduced a bunch of uncertainty into the process. So I post my game to Greenlight. I have no idea how long it's going to take. I don't know what thresholds I need to hit or how many other people are also competing for those spots. So over the long run, we realized that developers really need some kind of transparent, predictable path to be able to bring their games to Steam. And Greenlight hasn't been really solving that aspect of it. So that's why we kind of want to move away from that and give a more predictable path, just so you can plan more for the future. Like, when am I going to be able to release my game?
And we kind of prioritize some of that work based on what we actually hear from developers, right? An indie game dev reaches out and has a game that they think is an awesome fit for Valentine's Day. They want to know, can they release it in time for February 14th? They don't know, should they submit it to Greenlight? There's uncertainty. They're not sure how long it might take. And so getting out of the way and letting that developer ship direct is, in our opinion, solving some concrete problems that indie devs have, especially.
Yeah, well, we've been working on that a lot. Like, within the last couple of years, we've had 2 big discoverability focused updates. And the role that we're trying to play is that we don't want to, like, Valve as a bunch of individuals don't want to be in the way of connecting really interesting content to the customers that are interested in that content. And so since there's more and more diversity in the content available, and there's more and more diversity in the customer groups and so then it's a matter of matching up, like, which interesting title to which customer that's likely to be interested in that. So a bunch of our updates have been geared around towards that. So it's really built around the recommendation engine and what your friends are playing and what any curators you follow. So we're going to keep experimenting and trying new things along those lines to improve matching up customers with the best content. Yeah. But at the same time, there's going to be games that turn out not to appeal to very many customers, and so we have to have a system where those games can exist, and we can have a system where if customers turn out to be interested in them, they can bubble up. But if customers are not interested in them, that they're not in the way of a bunch of other games. So there's a lot of fine tuning of the balance in there.
Yeah, I think a lot of the fear or concern both from devs and customers is, like, if 500 games come out on Steam this month, how will people find mine? And I think our attitude, both in terms of making sure developers don't have that fear and making sure customers can find games they're happy with, is if 500 games come out this month, but you're able to find the 5 that are most interesting to you, the other 495 aren't actually a problem. They're not causing an issue for you, or they're not giving you a worse experience on the store. You're able to find the content that you're really excited about. That's hard. It takes a lot of work, so we're going to keep working on it, but that's kind of the end goal.
Yeah, I mean, the game industry is fundamentally in a different place than it was 5 years ago when we were more hands-on with that curated model. Like, there's just more games being made, and the upside of that is that creates a lot of really interesting variety in the entertainment experiences that I can have as a customer, right? And so it was clear to us that we couldn't keep doing that curated model and successfully give customers what each one was interested in. Yeah. And yeah, I bet there's a bunch of people that kind of have this rosy vision of the good old days, but the industry is very different than it used to be, and I don't think that old model, well, we know that old model would not be adequately serving customers today anymore.
Yeah. Just in the last year, we've brought 16 million new customers to Steam, people who have bought a product, made the first purchase they've ever made through the Steam store. There's just no way that a team of 10 people in Bellevue, Washington is going to make the right choices for all of those customers coming from Turkey or Japan or Korea or Brazil or Paraguay or wherever. So one of the interesting, and I think the things that's got us really excited, is as new developers come to the platform, they're using tools that are more accessible. They have a bunch of really awesome game creation tools that are free or near free, so they can make games for the first time. A lot of those developers are shipping games that bring new customers to the platform, and that makes the marketplace bigger for everybody. So I think one of the things we've seen is as the number of developers from a country grows on Steam, the number of customers from that country also grows. It's hard to say if that's just causation or correlation, but we're seeing a lot of really encouraging growth in new areas. And I think that's a part of it as well, is there's more and more customers who have broader and broader tastes. So looking back at 2012 or 2013, we probably missed good games and didn't make perfect decisions then, and there's no way we could make good curation decisions for all those different customers now.
Right now, the system of Greenlight as a way of bringing your game to Steam inherently has a bunch of unpredictability in it, which is, as a developer, I come and I post my game to Greenlight. I don't know how long it's going to take until my game is greenlit. So it makes it hard for me as a developer to then plan well, am I going to be able to release on date X? When should I start spinning up any community outreach? When should I start talking to the press about my game? Like, right? So as soon as there's some amount of unpredictability into that process, then it makes a bunch of other things much more difficult for developers. The new process that we're looking at is, as a developer, you have a straightforward process. You come, you fill out some paperwork, you tell us about your company, your identity, your tax information, bank information, all the stuff that we actually need to do business with you. You pay a fee that we're trying to figure out exactly what the right range for that fee is, but you pay a fee and then you can ship your product on Steam. For games that release on Steam today, there's a brief review process where we launch the game, we look at it, does it run on the operating systems it says it's going to run on? Does it, run through a couple of brief tests. It's nothing like a onerous certification process because we don't really want to get in the way of releases.
Nope.
It doesn't matter. Whatever, it's any old.
No, it's more of a QA check, if you will, to make sure the thing's not going to wipe your hard drive or do something malicious, right? And then I assume after everything gets passed, the developer gets a mail that says you've been cleared and you can publish in this time window.
Because quality of the gameplay experience itself is really a subjective thing. Like, you probably like really different games than I like, and so we don't want to be imposing on what kind of experiences customers can discover and turn out to be really enjoyable and awesome experiences.
What about things like the digital homicide stuff that was going on? What about the asset flips from Unity?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not looking for quality, are you still going to be trying to find like, oh, that was just taken directly from the Unity store and put onto Steam again? Like, are there any checks for stuff around like stuff like that?
I think there are two kind of answers to that question. The first one is, right now you pay a $100 Greenlight fee and you can submit as many games to Greenlight as you want. So we're still talking about
one $100 fee.
Yeah,
Right.
We're still talking about the range of fees that make sense. I think the sort of range we're looking at is in the ballpark of like somewhere between $200 and $5,000 per app ID. And we've talked to developers on a variety of spectrums. Some of them feel really strongly about different values, and there's kind of pros and cons to all of those angles. But the idea is, number one, you're paying a fee per app. So there's a little bit more maybe
Of a deterrent there,
deterrent or motivation of, hey, if you're serious about launching this product and serving customers' needs, you pay us a fee. You're able to recoup that fee if your game earns revenue on Steam, but if it doesn't, you don't recoup that fee. The other angle is, and this is something that's already true, we just follow the same DMCA process that we've always followed. We're really responsive to that, and so if there's problems, people uploading content that doesn't belong to them, we respond and take it down.
And we're giving more tools for reporting that.
Yeah, that's right. That's one of the things that really the last couple of years have taught us, is just how valuable the community is, how valuable our moderators are, and so making sure that all of these changes to the storefront are also accompanied by tools to support customers and mods to.
And the need for a deterrent is driven by what? Are there just too many games at the moment coming out on Greenlight, and it's just...
No, specifically to sort of swat after, the people doing nefarious
Joke
stuff or the
submissions
jokey stuff, right? Like, is it really worth, on the high side, is it really worth a few grand for a joke? Whereas maybe for $100, and I can do as many jokes as I want for $100, or be as nefarious as I want for $100. That's one thing versus $500 per time or $5,000 on the higher side, and that's, these guys keep underscoring, and I'll say it again, it's something that we're really grappling with in this process, is what is that right fee that doesn't cause upstart developers who are really on a shoestring budget to not be able to, becomes this barrier at the $5,000 level maybe, versus getting rid of the folks that he's talking about, which are people that either want to do nefarious things or they think it's funny to upload. No.
Yeah.
I guess there's a lot of differences, both in terms of how things are presented to customers and in terms of how developers get on and ship content. And I think there's fundamental differences in how the platform holders look at how they run a platform. So from our own perspective, we want to make happy customers. And we do that by ensuring that we have content on Steam, or trying to have as much of the content on Steam that customers are clearly interested in, and being able to helping the developers that are clearly making customers happy, and thinking about ways to limit the impact of developers that are making customers angry. And so it's really all about building the system so that the good content can naturally rise up, and not artificially inflated content by buying ads or any, you can't buy marketing on Steam, and there's a reason for that, because we think good content will naturally bubble up. People will find it, they'll they'll enjoy it and they'll spread the word, and things that people are buying will get better traction.
Well, I think from a storefront perspective, one of the things that we've always been really deliberate about is we don't want a world where people feel like they have to get somebody at Valve to give a game a stamp of approval or a thumbs up for it to ever show up to customers. There are games that launch every week, at this point probably every day, that nobody at Valve has played before, nobody at Valve was familiar with, but they quickly end up on the front page of our store because they're delighting customers. They don't have to be an editor's choice or anything like that. And that's something that's really important to us, is we know that we would certainly miss great games if we were trying to be the gatekeepers of what's good and what's not.
Well, that's what we're grappling with, right? What is the number that doesn't lock him out, but hopefully dissuades people that want to be nefarious or funny?
Would you ever allow like?
It's hard to know where that number is.
Well, what's the damage being done by the guy that wants to be nefarious and funny?
Well, he's suing Jim Sterling, and he tried to sue everybody.
Yeah, of course. But like, he's going to lose that. That's kind of worth it to have all these other games, isn't it? It was always my
right. Well, there will be that trade-off.
Right.
Yes. Right. But to the extent that we can sort of not make that, just open season.
Right.
Well,
that's good.
Is that
right?
the core problem here? Is that the thing that's driving this? Is all this shit that you just want to get rid of? Is that what's...
No, I mean, for one thing, it's actually really hard to define accurately across the board, like bad games that are bad to everyone all the time or good to everyone all the time. The customer who has 25 visual novels in their Steam library is really hoping we release more visual novels, whereas the person with a bunch of other types of games is never going to buy a visual novel no matter what happens. So those customers are just looking for different things. So I think it's less about us trying to define, oh, here's the quality line, or here's what's a bad game and here's a good one, and more saying, hey, if you've got that great idea, if you've got a concept, you can bring your game to Steam and find customers that are excited about it. And if you're doing the right things, if you're delighting customers and building a community, your game can flourish.
Something interesting has happened to Greenlight over the last few years, especially since we introduced the first Discovery update to the Steam store, which is, at that point, it became very clear to customers that there was more interesting things to do in the Steam store than there was to go and vote on potential products in Greenlight. Okay. So we've seen quite a bit of a decline in just the number of people participating in Greenlight. Mm-hmm. So it's true that those games are getting some visibility, and there's some benefit to going through Greenlight in terms of kind of building your audience early, getting some feedback on your marketing. These are things that we're trying to encourage developers to also accomplish by just coming to Steam earlier in the process and putting up a coming soon page so they can start talking to customers and get customers to wishlist their game and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think a big part of that is Greenlight, it's kind of solved and created this interesting solution for us where you had your Greenlight queue. You could show up and look at a dozen games in Greenlight and say, if that one was on Steam, I'd buy it. If this one was, I wouldn't, and so on. And we realized there's so many games on Steam right now. That's a Steam level feature now. You just log in and you have your Steam discovery queue, which is one of the biggest sources of page views on the whole store. Wow. We realized, this is a great service to people. We should make sure this is part of the shopping experience, not just the Greenlighting experience.
Yeah. And I think we've moved their chance to have input on stuff or to vote on things from does this game get on Steam period to is this game successful?
Would you ever consider, so like the example of the person who wouldn't be able to afford maybe if the fee was a couple grand, would you ever consider maybe allowing users to use some of their excess Steam wallet money to maybe push forward that? Like maybe they could, like, oh, this is my idea, but I can't do that. And it's kind of like a crowdfunding
It's
thing.
a great idea. And the other thing to note in the midst of this is that early access is not going away.
Oh, it's not?
It's not.
Oh, okay.
Just Greenlight.
Yeah. Yep. Well, but
so if you're...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
To your point and your particular question, that's part of why we're announcing this transition before we're actually making the transition, is because there's probably a bunch of interesting ideas like that are going to come out of the community and bring some ideas to us that we hadn't even considered. And it turns out, actually, maybe there's another feature there that we should actually build before we make this transition, because it will help serve whatever audience of game developers or customers in a better way. Yeah. So at the moment, we've been making, like any other content on Steam, we've been making a lot of improvements to just the tools that customers have to filter out the content that they're not interested in and find more of the content that they are interested in. There gets to a point where you start talking about more explicit content, like pornography in particular, that there's a bunch more filtering tools that we need to work on, and there's maybe potentially some legal issues that we need to work through in order to accomplish that. So we're not ready to do that yet. Once we have this direct path, there's going to be certain kinds of content that we just say we can't support that right now.
So the legal barrier is the biggest thing.
It's one of them.
Yeah, it's one of the things, yeah.
And it's
There's
important to
other
think
problems
globally with that.
Almost
Pretty
every
much,
country and every state has different ideas on how to.
It's a massive patchwork to try to work through.
Yeah. Even within the last year, we've actually made a lot of progress in terms of the tools that customers have to be able to filter out that content. So we're more comfortable accepting a lot more of that content kind of up to this fuzzy line of what pornography is
Moving
and
from
how
mature
that's
to
defined.
pure porn, right?
Yeah.
To put it in black and white.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times it's a conversation of a group of internal folks, some lawyers included, and I think for questions from individual developers, our hope is we just talk with them and say, let's take a look at this thing. I think one of the things we need to always work on is making sure we're approachable to those devs, so that it's not a mysterious thing. I mean, we want to just say, hey, let's have a conversation, and we'll talk to you and find out if we can work together and help you find customers or not.
So going away from Greenlight and early access, and I know that's a big deal. Gabe Newell in the AMA and the other people that talked about it, big focus was trying to improve support for Steam.
Yeah.
And he said some pretty broad terms like, we're expanding it by 5 times, and we're trying to improve the ticketing process and everything. But so what exactly in the specifics of Steam support do you see as the biggest problems? And what are the major solutions that you see in the near future for that?
Yeah,
Chris happens to work on support.
I have
Here's
to
Chris
work
Boy.
I mean, I guess to get a little context history about it, we understand that we have a reputation for just having bad support, right? It's something that we're working on, and that comes from things like a couple. Well, the example here is that a couple years ago, this comes from user experiences of I submit a ticket, and some tickets a couple years ago would take 30 days to get a response, and that's just obviously not acceptable to anybody. So we have a very large focus internally on that whole area, and it started with, I should say, significantly expanding the size of the support team. We've also greatly increased the language support that we have, so it's really important to us to actually respond back to users in their native language, which is a really big thing when you're trying to answer a support ticket. And then we've also had this really big focus on just support features and development work in general. So things that have come out of that over the last couple years are things like the refund system that we have, a new help site. We've had a big focus on account recovery and just account security issues in general. And then we also have a whole new ticket system, which to the user is kind of thin, but behind the scenes there's a whole lot to improve responses and categorize tickets and get people answers faster. In addition to that, we've had a big push too, there's places in Steam where you shouldn't have to submit a ticket. You should be able to help yourself, and there's just these things that can just go away and not become tickets, right? So all that said, that's been a really big focus for us. When you look at Steam in general and what people are working on, to us, these are still projects that we're actually doing, or we're still actually focusing on. If you think about it right now, the current state is if you, for many tickets, when you submit a ticket now, you get a response within 24 hours. And then we have improved, again, sending it in the user's native language. But obviously this is not, we don't think that we're done there. It's an ongoing project. And then all those things we've been doing, and also, on the side too, just continuing to expand the size of the team and continuing to improve the quality of each individual responses. This is something that is a big focus for us internally.
Can you give us a sense of the size of the team that you've expanded?
I don't have a number on the size of the team. The team is both it encompasses a lot of different people. So I forget the number that was put out in the AMA, but it's both. We've been expanding both people who answer tickets, language support just in general. That both means tickets and also outside on Steam and our games and in other areas. And it's also just the engineers and the designers and everybody else who works on that team. So.
Are any of the responses ever automated? Because it seems like sometimes somebody can submit a ticket and the response may be very, very different. Sometimes people will be like, oh, something happened with the game, it's not really working correctly, and then they'll get oh, if you've been VAC banned, you can't get it removed. It doesn't seem like it sometimes doesn't line up. Are any of them ever automated, or maybe it's just kind of...
Yeah, so there are definitely cases where when somebody submits a ticket, and especially if we need more information, if you're doing account recovery tickets are obviously a large volume of tickets, and for various reasons, whether it's my email changed or my phone number changed or I can't remember my password. So there's times there where we send automated responses if we need more information to handle that ticket, and we send it right away. Like if we didn't collect it up front and we analyze that we need some more information, we'll send that out. And we try and make it really clear that we need more information. Please respond so we can continue to help you with your ticket. There's certain other places where we do have some automated responses, and we've really tried to make it very obvious in cases where that is an automated response. In general, there's a large set of text and common things that we send back from human beings to users, because it's either a common problem or common phrasing that we like to put out there. And I think in general, some of those haven't been great in the past, and they've come across as more automated, or we've also come across as we've just missed and sent the wrong thing, or we've answered the wrong question. Right? There's lots of things on an individual ticket level when you look at a particular ticket that that can have variance there. So part of all that work that I described is improving all those processes. Yeah, there's 2 hours with some leeway, and the reality is we look at all those tickets. We do a lot of refund requests, and we feel that that system makes it really easy for people to go buy a game, and if I feel like I got the wrong thing or if something was inappropriate there, I can get a refund.
The refund system exists to make sure customers are happy with the stuff they're buying on Steam. We want them to be spending a bunch of time enjoying the games that they play, and so getting in their way or making that harder, it was a super natural next step, I think, to ship the refund policy and say, hey, let's make sure that when you buy a game, you're happy with it and you get to spend a lot of time playing it.
To maybe buy a game that maybe you're not so sure about.
Exactly.
But to answer your question directly, I think it's kind of all of the above, right? Like, we think what we have now is better than nothing, which is what we kind of had before.
Sure.
It may change in the future because we're constantly changing as customers are changing, and then there's going to be special circumstances like the one you mentioned where we want to be flexible and say, this kind of falls outside of the usual circumstances, so maybe different rules can apply here too. We try to be agile and sensitive to those moments when they happen. Yeah,
one of the things we looked at really early on was for not just short games, but a lot of different types of content. Like, was there anomalies? Did this policy seem flawed? Was it punishing developers in a certain type of game? And the data didn't really reflect real problems. We didn't see a pattern of behavior. One of the things I think Chris can probably speak even more to is paying attention to users' behaviors over time. So a single account that buys 10 games on the same day, plays each of them for an hour and 59 minutes and refunds all of them, is the next refund request that person makes might be treated differently from somebody who's never requested a refund before. So I think part of it is us just being smart and realistic about how customers are using the policy. But obviously for us, it's equally not great if developers who make a certain type of game or a certain type of content feel like they can't be successful on Steam. So we paid a lot of really close attention, both when the policy first shipped and ongoing now, to make sure developers can still make a good living and have a good experience on Steam.
Right, sure.
I don't want to speak too much for Alden, but something happened like today that I thought was great. We shared an update about the Steam Discovery Update 2.0 and some of the data, and in a comment on Gamasutra, somebody wrote back and said, hey, I don't buy that at all. That looks like that number might be wrong for this reason and that reason. And Alden, I think a couple hours later, was like, that's a really good question. Let's break that down. So I think us being proactive and transparent like that is important. There's also, EJ and some of the game team folks talk to you guys about, there's different types of data, right? There's a thread on Reddit where people are complaining about a problem, that it's just really clearly a problem that we should fix in 5 minutes. There's other data that you need to look at multiple sources and figure out, okay, customers are asking for this one feature, but the actual results of shipping that feature are different from what they might perceive. So it's not always super clear cut to say, oh, the data is a big arrow pointing us in this direction.
Okay.
That's why we're moving to this more direct path, is because in the past, like, if you think about curation, there's sort of two aspects to that. There's curation of which titles can even be on the Steam backend and have the opportunity to reach customers. And then there's a curation of, from that pool of products, how do we pick which ones get shown to customers? And so the direct path is another step down this process of getting out of the way of determining what is even allowed onto our system, because we don't want to be in that position, right? We want whatever game developer has a product that's trying to reach customers, we want them to be able to be on the system, be able to utilize all our tools, be able to reach customers, be able to make happy customers, use all of our community features and whatnot. And so then then once we've streamlined that process, then it becomes a challenge of how do we make sure that customers can find the content that they're most interested in.
Just real quick, that beta client update that came out a couple of days ago with that image in it, was that purposeful? Were you trying to tell us something, or was
That was not purposeful.
Okay, how soon can we expect something along those lines? Because that looked really cool. Also, Halo 5 was in that image.
Yeah, I actually didn't look.
We put a lot of things in our mock-ups that are.
Oh, that's a mock-up.
That was just a mock-up.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's a mock-up of something that's being worked on that doesn't have a date right now.
Yeah,
That's
you
probably
can. I mean,
the most
you can look
succinct
at that screenshot. It's some early concept stuff that people were playing around with. What really we're looking at though is that I think that there's in the Steam community there's lots of stuff that users are doing right now where they're either they're creating screenshots or sharing artwork or they're making broadcasts or they're contributing to the workshop. There's marketplace. There's all this cool stuff going on. And a lot of that is kind of isolated from the core Steam experience. So we are working on large improvements to especially to the Steam experience, but also the Steam client, to really to help solve that issue and make that experience better. Yeah, we have improvements coming around for both library, chat, overlay, how Steam is using VR, all these types of things are things we're working on. We hope our plan is probably sometime this summer that we'll have a new client beta that users can opt into, and then we're excited to see what people think about those improvements and get their feedback. So.
It may or may not look anything like the concept.
Yeah, to be clear on the concept art.
It looked cool.
Yeah. And thank you very much for watching. As I said, this video would not have happened without the sponsor, skins.cash. Check out the link in the description below if you want to get rid of some of your skins for an extra 3% added onto your quote. Yes, the next and final Valve interview that was conducted was the Valve General Interview, which was essentially just Gabe Newell. Eric Johnson was also there, but he answered a few questions, and it was mostly just Gabe speaking about pretty much anything that was going on at Valve. Probably the most informative out of all of the interviews. That will be going up as soon as I get it done. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Alden McVicker. This is Valve News Network. Have a good day. Adios.